Anakin's journey from being well-meaning but flawed all the way to joining the Sith, right? To the point of where he just goes out and murders children.
That's why I said the third act was probably one of the most amazing acts I've seen in the whole franchise. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here today with my boys Daniel and Hervé.
How we doing?
Hey.
Welcome back, Hervé.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
Good to have you back, bro. And today, Daniel, you want to tell the audience what we'll be discussing?
So this is the next entry in our series, Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us have only seen once and some of us have seen many times and know it well. This week we are concluding our journey through the Star Wars prequels with episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So having seen the movie for the first time and now having seen the entire trilogy, what's your overall impressions?
Firstly, I think third act in this episode was probably the best act I've seen out of the whole trilogy. The first two acts, not so much. I kind of zoned out a bit. There was some good moments in the first two acts, especially seeing the eternal conflict and the whole deception that was happening throughout towards Anakin. Obviously, seeing the internal conflict that he's facing. So it was definitely interesting to see that. But but I kind of zoned out a bit because it was a bit confusing. Because at first I thought the way that they were acting, I thought in the first scene when they're like the whole when Anakin killed what's his name, Dooku, I thought that whole sequence there, like the whole scene, like the first, I thought it was all a dream. Because when they returned, it felt a bit weird because when he killed him, the reaction, even from the reaction from ObiWan, because I thought he was gonna get angry that Anakin killed Dooku like that, but he wasn't. He just said, "You're the hero." So I thought it was a dream. Because I remember when Luke was in some sort of, I don't know what he was in. Remember there was a scene where he was in part of his training where he saw Darth Vader in some sort of forest.
Yeah, he was in the dark side cave on Dagobah and he saw Darth Vader, and when he defeated Vader, it was him.
Yeah, so I thought that was part of his training. I think, okay, maybe him killing Dooku I thought all of that was just he was in some sort of simulation, or he was in some sort of cave like that, forest cave or whatever. I thought, okay, cool. He killed Dooku. This is part of his training. He's gonna snap out of it. But the reaction to him killing him, I was like, okay, this is a bit strange. I understand now that the guy,
Palpatine.
Yeah, and I understand. Obviously, it made sense why he was acting that way because obviously he was a fraud. He was the Sith. He was a master. So I understand. But the way that everyone else was acting, it was like, you guys gonna show, like, isn't anyone gonna kind of address what he did to Dooku? I get it, that Dooku was the enemy, but he pretty much killed him in a way a Jedi shouldn't. But to be fair, Samuel Jackson nearly killed the master as well, even though Anakin was pleading that they should give him a trial. So obviously the Jedi aren't perfect, so that kind of makes sense. But yes, sorry.
He did show up and try to arrest him, and then he fought back.
Yeah.
Right. So Plan A was arrest him and bring him before the Senate, and when that didn't work, it turned out into a lightsaber fight.
Yeah, but then the master was on the ground, helpless, and you could have just arrested him then. He didn't arrest him.
At that point he didn't try anymore. Yeah, just to stick with the opening scene, it's actually almost my favorite scene in the movie because of how it parallels the sequence in episode 6 where Luke is brought before the Emperor and the Emperor tries to stoke the conflict between Vader and Luke in order to nudge Luke towards the dark side. And here he's doing it again, and this time it succeeds, at least in part, with Anakin. Right, he's sitting on the throne. He's not physically doing anything, but he's taking him on, and he's getting him to not just take Dooku prisoner, but actually to execute him, which is killing somebody in anger. It's like one of the things that pushes you further along the dark side, right? And just the visual of him sitting on the large chair, just sitting there as an observer, and kind of manipulating Anakin into doing the kinds of things he would later try and fail to manipulate Luke into. I thought that was really strong. Okay. And then it's notable, I think, that he succeeds with getting Anakin to kill Dooku, but he doesn't succeed him in abandoning Obi-Wan, right? Obi-Wan is unconscious on the floor, and Anakin tries to go and help him, but Palpatine says, no, there's no time, right? We have to go. But Anakin ignores him and helps Obi-Wan so that he doesn't die in the ship crash, right? And so he's got one foot in the dark side at this point, and he's still a real Jedi with the other half, right? Because Palpatine succeeded in one ways out of two in corrupting him in that sequence.
You know what's annoying though? I think the council could have prevented this from happening. It was just that it just kept on like pushing him away, kind of like lying to him. It's like, why? I just don't get it. Like, you can see already that even Yoda kept on mentioning how he senses a lot of fear in him, and you can see that Yoda already senses threat in him, and I feel like the council's starting to kind of see that as well, especially with Samuel Jackson. Well, not the rest of them because you already hear from them, but Samuel Jackson, I feel like he senses a bit that he's not ready, so I'm guessing that he kind of knows that, you know, he's got some sort of, pretty much he's kind of confirming what Yoda is saying is true. So it's like, you can see that. So you guys pushing him away by saying you're not ready to be on part of the, like, a master yet, and just like not telling him plans. I think there was a plan which they didn't tell him about what they wanted to do. I forgot what it was, but Samuel Jackson told him to stay here. I forgot what it was. He told him not to.
They sent Obi-Wan to that planet. I suppose, like, Anakin wanted to go, and Palpatine had recommended him, and then they slighted him again by saying, "No, you will stay here, and Obi-Wan will go on the mission."
Yeah, exactly. So them pushing him away is like, you already can tell, you can see the characteristics of this guy. Yeah. He's very rash. He's like impatient. He's got like small bursts of anger. So why are you going to keep agitating? I'm not saying you should kind of like do everything that he says, but at the same time, like, accommodate him, help him. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, kind of like rewarding. Sometimes when you reward people for their work, it feels good. You know what I'm saying? That could have, I just feel like they could have prevented him from joining the dark side. I feel like they're definitely part of the reason why he was a part of the dark side, even though he did it to protect, what's her name, Pam, to stop, was it Pam?
Padme. So I think that whole sequence is like a very mixed bag. Well, not sequence, but this whole thing about Palpatine playing Anakin against the Council. Because on paper, the Council does everything correct, but at the same time, they should be seeing that something is up. Right? This whole thing about, they see how the office of the Chancellor is shrouded in the dark side, and that should be a clue that something's going on, but they never do anything about it until it's too late, until they walk right into his trap. And them trying to stop him looks like them trying to take over the Republic, right? But at the same time, Anakin is also being unreasonable, right? There's never been anybody as young as him being made a master or being put on the council and things like that. So his expectation that he should be is completely unreasonable. So I think some parts of it work, some parts of it don't. But I think overall, this entire, like, I think the core of the movie is really Anakin's journey from being well-meaning but flawed all the way to siding with Palpatine and joining the Sith, right? To the point of where he just goes out and murders children.
That's why I said the third act was probably one of the most amazing. I think it was probably the most amazing act I've seen in the whole franchise, because it had everything, even from the fight choreography. This fight, like the battle between him and Obi, was the best I've seen in the franchise. I felt like it just got more authentic. Also in this film, I feel like the instrumental that they were using, they didn't overdo it, which I really liked in this whole film. Because I think with the previous Star Wars, which I kind of found like it was not annoying, but it was kind of overbearing sometimes. It was just the music. I felt like they were overdoing it, but the music that they were using now fitted the tone that was being presented to us, and especially in the battle, was just amazing. Like the battle, that fight scene between him and Anakin just felt so. Like that triggered. When I say it triggered something in me, it definitely like made me want to be a part of the battle, because it felt like father versus son. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, but even though I didn't even have no reason to hate Obi, I don't know where that hate came from. It just didn't make sense where it came from. Where did it come from?
So I think the part that doesn't make sense is that he's personally jealous about Obi-Wan, right? He has this thing about how Obi-Wan and Padme have a romance of some kind going on, and he keeps suspecting them of having betrayed him. And I'm not sure that has a basis in it. Like everything else, I think works in the sense that Palpatine keeps engineering situations that, from Anakin's point of view, validate all his fears and anxieties and grievances. But this one, I'm not sure it does. So I think that is one of the weaker parts of it.
Yeah, okay, I would agree with that. I had a question as well. what is a Sith? Like, I know it's the Master, but what is it actually? 'Cause I think they've explained it, but obviously I watched it a couple of days.
So I think that's something you're just supposed to know. There had been something like 15 years between the end of the original trilogy and the start of the prequel trilogy. And in that time, novels have been written and stuff like that. And the Sith were really explored in that. And I think at that point, audiences kind of knew what Sith were. And essentially what they are is they're like the Jedi in the sense that they are a way of using the Force that is like the diametric opposite of what the Jedi are, right? The Jedi are about balance and about selflessness, and the Sith are all about selfishness and passion, right? So they use their passions and strong emotions to draw more energy or more power from the Force, and that's how they get stronger. And they use that power to benefit themselves as opposed to benefiting others, which is what Jedi are supposed to do. And there's always a master and there's always an apprentice, and they're supposed to try to exploit each other. In that way, they get stronger, right? The master keeps trying to exploit the apprentices as much as possible, and that way they get stronger. And the apprentices are supposed to learn what they can from the master, and then until they're strong enough to overthrow the master and become the master, and then the cycle repeats. So it's a completely opposite way of approaching the Force. And Palpatine is part of that tradition. And people like Darth Maul and Dooku, and then later Anakin, become his apprentices. That's the bottom line of it. Yeah. And they are the historical enemy of the Jedi. And that is why the Jedi keep talking about how Sith Lords are their specialty, and if they get any clue that the Sith are involved, the Jedi drop everything and make it their top priority, because those are their historical enemies. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it makes more sense now. Because they kept on mentioning, I was like, okay, what the hell? Sith, are they some alien, even though they pretty much look human?
Yeah, no, they're an organization that can be human, they can be alien, and really the core of the Sith code is, or the Sith approach to life, is in the story Palpatine tells Anakin in the opera about how the Force is a way to make yourself stronger so that you can get what you want. In this case, protecting the ones you care about, right? But you do it for selfish reasons. And it's something the Jedi would not allow and would not encourage.
But would you argue? But would you say that Anakin's reason for joining the Sith was a selfish reason, though?
Well, his main motivation is that he did not want to lose Padme.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't about helping her. It was about he had already lost his mother, right? And he did not want to go through that again. And that was kind of the weakness where Palpatine could get his fangs into him.
I just think, considering that to be a reason to join the Dark Force.
Well, I mean, the Jedi were not going to help him.
Yeah,
right? They don't even approve of the relationship. Like, as far as they're concerned, he should not be with her anyway. And this is exactly why, right? Like, Yoda says it outright several times that the loss of fear is ultimately a selfish emotion from his point of view, right? In his opinion, and it leads you to do selfish things, like Anakin does in the story.
So, what's the consensus when it comes to the Council? Do they believe that they're the reason for Anakin's downfall?
I'm not sure what the consensus on that is. So my view is that the Jedi are a broken institution in this movie, or in this entire trilogy. We see them at a time where they have lost their way and are no longer able to function as people, really. They are so focused on not doing evil, like not falling to the dark side, not becoming Sith, or something like it, that they've forgotten how to do good. Like, I think my bottom line. Like, they're always focused on how do we avoid falling to the dark side. And that leaves them no time to actually help people and care about other people. And people like Qui-Gon and ObiWan are the ones who don't follow those rules that strictly, and therefore still are able to help other people and see other people. Like notice that they exist. Whereas all the other Jedi sit in their temple and contemplate the Force and don't do a whole lot of everything else. And it's not clear, at least from the movies, whether they always were this way, but they are in this era, and that is their downfall.
Well, overall, my experience with this it was good. I think that the first two acts, it just, for me, I learned how to take some time. But wait, did Anakin end up? Was he the one that ended up killing Pam when he used the Force, or what do you refer to this?
Yeah, he choked her with the Force, right?
Yeah, so that was what killed her then. Obviously, she was given quite
Well, she died in childbirth.
Yeah, but was that a contribution to that?
I mean, it can't have helped, right? Like I don't know. It's not supposed to be clear. It's just a sequence of events that leads to Padme dying, right? And like there's this joke about how Yoda's like Padme dies in childbirth, right? And the medical droid says she lost her will to live. And there's a joke that they tried to get a medical droid, but they got a literature droid instead. And therefore, that's where that explanation comes from, because that's not exactly the most scientific explanation. So, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, wasn't there like a theory or a parallel between sort of Anakin Skywalker taking his first breath as Darth Vader and Padme kind of losing her sort of life force?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely set up as a transition, right? One thing ends and the next begins. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and Padme very much stands for the Republic and for the old order, and she was always the biggest believer in the old system. And her death is also the birth of the new, or like of the Empire, right?
Yeah. Basically, so you're saying it's more like a symbolism thing as opposed to actual?
I think so. Yeah. I think the literal explanation of what actually happened and why she died, like she has to die because in Episode 4 we know that Luke doesn't have a mother. That's why. Right, and everything else is kind of engineered to fall into place in the last 10 minutes of the movie.
And they didn't show how Anakin got the scar. What, did I miss it?
Well, falling into lava did it.
No, that was before.
What?
I'm saying before. He even had the scar before on his face. As soon as he was introduced, I saw the scar on his, I don't know if it was left side or right side.
I don't remember if there's a specific, like if this is like the battle on, was it Geonosis at the end? I don't know. I think it's more to show that he has been fighting and that he has scars because of it.
Okay, I thought it was
I don't remember if it's that refers to a specific event, but it's more like he has been fighting a war and he has scars to prove it.
Okay, I thought there was gonna be some sort of significance to that for some reason or a backstory, but I was thinking, okay, cool. I'm seeing the scar that wasn't there before episode 2, so maybe there's some sort of backstory to how we got that. Why? Because in this one he just felt more like aggravated. Like he just felt more angrier, and I was thinking,
yeah. So I think it's interesting that on the one hand, this like he's even more frustrated and angry than he was in the last movie, but he's also in a way the happiest because fighting this war is what he's good at, right? And he was never really allowed to be good at anything before. He was supposed to, do his studies and put in his time, and one day it will pay off. And he was never patient enough for that. And then the war comes along and he gets to prove himself and he gets to be the big hero. And he really thrives in that situation. Like in the opening battle, he has fun, right? Like he really enjoys, he enjoys being the hero. He enjoys just letting loose and no longer being kept in a box, essentially. So I think this is kind of the one time we really see him self-actualized, which is tragic in its own way, right? That it had to be that in order for him to actually be himself.
Yeah, but he didn't have to. Like I said, I just think it was being rash. He was getting premonitions, but he didn't know.
Yeah. So one thing that we finally see in this movie is the war, right? So last time we talked about how like we're 2 movies into a trilogy and we still don't really understand the key conflict and the whole Clone War thing that has been promised or that we've been hearing about for decades has not really happened yet. And now we actually kind of see it. What was your impression of that? Just how it was depicted, and was this like finally the movie delivering what it had promised, or was it more, that it was too little too late, or somewhere in between, or what was your impression?
To be fair, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really paying attention to that storyline. I was more like consumed by Anakin's.
Mm-hmm.
See his story and his development into Darth Vader. So when it came to the whole Clone Wars, I didn't even realize, because all I was seeing was just deception, and obviously, all I was seeing was deception. Obviously, you see the end, and obviously you see how everything builds up to that Cold War. So I don't think it was too late for me, because I was just more interested and engulfed in the characters rather than the war itself. So in terms of if the war was too late for me, I don't believe it was too late for me. I did like how it unraveled and seeing how, the Jedi were actually getting dismantled. It was crazy to actually see that, the downfall, and obviously kind of, it puts in terms of like seeing Yoda when he was exiled, and now it kind of like puts things in perspective. Oh, okay. It was just nice to see, well, not nice to see the Jedi's downfall, but it was nice to see how Yoda ended up where he ended up in Anakin's story trilogy. It was good. It was kind of like it was just like good to see the backstory behind Yoda's and ObiWan's exile, and what led up to that. And I think it was. I don't think it was too late. I don't think it was too late whatsoever. So when did they say they should have showed the kind of like war coming into play?
Like the first thing we hear about Anakin is that he and Obi-Wan fought in the Clone Wars, right? This is all the way back in Episode 4.
Yeah.
So that is basically what we knew of his backstory. And then we get to see his story, and the actual Clone War is 1 movie out of 3, right? That's kind of what I was getting at.
I don't think that's too late though. That's like, yeah, I get it, but I don't think that's too late though. Yeah, I just don't think it's too late, because even like with what was it, Dune chapter, even with like Dune, you could tell it's going to be like a long story. Like there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So I just thought it's the same thing with Star Wars, just a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And obviously ended up with.
Wouldn't you say like part of the main draw of the prequels was seeing that journey of Anakin becoming Darth Vader, because of how sort of monumental of a character he was in sort of the original trilogy? That even I know that the Clone Wars is like sort of like a big part of it, but I feel like maybe the direction that they wanted to go with was just to kind of show the beginning to the end of sort of Anakin Skywalker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely Anakin's story first and foremost. I do think the Clone War is the backdrop to all of it, right? It's the reason why he believes what he believes, and it's the reason why the Jedi fail. It's the reason why the Republic turns into the Empire. It shouldn't have been 3 movies of just this, but I think it should have been more. And even in this movie, we don't see that much of it. Right? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
What was interesting though was to see that Yoda still had the same mentality in Luke's story, which was a bit like, you would have thought someone that's ranked as a master would be able to kind of like see right from wrong, because his way of like you said, him and the other people in the council were very rigid. Like it was only Obi-Wan and what's Qui-Gon?
Yeah.
That were kind of like, they weren't really like the other masters. They kind of, they were pretty much different in the way that they moved. So you would have thought, obviously, in Luke's story, he would have learned from his old ways and be like, okay, cool. Let me not do the same things I did in, during Anakin's story. But he kind of still had the same mentality. So it was like, that's a bit weird. Like, just his approach.
Same mentality in what way?
In terms of, like, for example, how he went about training Luke and how his views, how he went about his views on Luke and training Luke. And, like rejection, for example, he was straight away rejected Anakin, and he did the same thing with Luke. It required Obi-Wan to kind of like persuade him. So it's like, wouldn't you think that he would have like a different approach towards Luke than that he had with Anakin, because like that was a contribution to Anakin's downfall?
Yeah, he probably doesn't see it that way. He probably believes in the Jedi way.
That's why I find it. The Jedi way failed. So it's like, okay, that failed. So surely you should have kind of like evolved and be like, okay, maybe I should try a different approach with Luke. But no, he continues the same approach, and it's like, yeah, but that way failed, bro. Like,
well, you could argue that they didn't train Anakin properly, right? They kept making exceptions for him. They admitted him at an older age than they normally would have. They gave him more freedoms. They gave him more latitude in how he interprets the rules, and they gave him powers beyond his experience and his years and things like that. So I think you can look at that and say, yeah, we didn't follow the playbook, and look what happened. So we have to be even stricter next time.
But you could say, but Anakin was an exception, though.
Well, maybe. Yeah. Or he's an example of what happens when you deviate from when you start making exceptions.
But their exceptions wasn't really like a fatherly figure type of exceptions that they were giving him. It was more stricter and more like, they were kind of like, they weren't appreciating him.
But do you think so?
I think there were times where, like, for example, the whole interaction that I had with Samuel Jackson.
Mace Windu.
The interaction that he had with Windu, when he was telling him to stay here, and then obviously when he was pretty much telling him to stay here, and he told him obviously, and he was telling him that he wasn't going to become a master. It was like that interaction there was like, bro, you're not really giving him a reason as to why as well. You only gave him I think you only gave him a reason. He didn't even give him a reason. He just said, not yet. He said, well done, but not yet. So they weren't even giving him reasons for why they were being tough on him. So it was like, just be more upfront and be more open with him. So I don't necessarily think that the exceptions that they were giving him was exceptions which were actually helping him, but was just getting him more angry.
Well, they did give him, like they did let him advance faster than should be normal, right?
Yeah.
Like I do think what you're describing is basically Anakin's perspective. I think from the Council's perspective, they are already giving him more than they should or normally should because of the exceptional circumstances and an acknowledgement of how powerful he is. And then he just wants more, and then that's where the resentment comes from.
Okay, I can see it from that point of view. Yeah.
I know that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I can see it from that point of view, because if you keep giving him something, then it's gonna get to the point where he's gonna end up becoming.
Like Anakin's grievance is basically that he's not been made a master, even though he shouldn't be, right? Like it's not like they're keeping something he deserves. Like he thinks he deserves it, but like by the rules, he is not. He has not earned it yet, right? And I think the Council's perspective of, well, we're already giving him more than we should, and he just keeps asking for more, and that's a bad sign, so we should put the brakes on. Makes perfect sense. And I at the same time, I can understand Anakin like feeling restricted, right? And that's the point of the whole conflict, right? That it's been engineered this way. That's the flame that Palpatine keeps fanning.
To be fair, we have to blame the Master as well, because I don't think that need for wanting more would have actually come into play if the Master wasn't deceiving him. Was it the Sith that told Anakin that he's gonna have a seat at the table on the council?
Well, he kept pushing him that way, right? He made him his personal representative, and he kept making comments about how, well, they haven't made you a master yet. Don't you think you deserve it? That kind of thing. Like he was definitely stoking the flames. So to wrap things up, you've now seen both trilogies, and you've seen the conclusion to this part of the story, right? So what's your overall takeaway to the prequels as a trilogy, as a complete story across the three movies, both as on their own merit, just as a story, and how they compare to the original trilogy?
I would say I've had a satisfying experience. It's kind of, I'll be honest, there are times where I was a bit zoned out because I think the standard of acting wasn't at a standard which I enjoyed too well. And like I said, the instrumentals and like the background music that we're using did feel a bit overbearing, and the choreography, like fight scenes, just didn't really seem too real. Like it just seems a bit too fake, and I understand. But besides that, I do think like the whole, like just seeing the universe and seeing how politics came into play, and like a mixture of that, and like I said, mixture of the lightsabers, which I think I'm going to be like one of those Star Wars fans that like watches Star Wars because of the lightsabers. I'm trying to not become like one of them, but I did feel more like engaged in the films when there was the battle scenes with the lightsabers. But in terms of the story itself, it was interesting at times. Like I said, I think overall I had a satisfying experience. I just think sometimes the performance and like the way that they were saying their dialogue kind of affected my experience. But overall, I had a satisfying experience. I'd probably say overall I'd give it my experience as a 6. Overall, I'd give, like, from everything I've seen so far, I'd give it a 6. It was definitely above average. I'd say, like I said, 6 for me is good. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
How does it compare to the original trilogy? Both as a story and as just as movies.
By the way, I was talking about everything in general.
Okay, so how do the two trilogies compare for you?
I definitely say this trilogy was my favorite trilogy. because it was more emotionally engaging, I felt, with obviously Anakin's story. But yeah, I think the reason why this trilogy was for me the most preferred was because it was just more emotionally engaging with certain scenes. Like, for example, when Anakin lost his family, and then Anakin went on a mad one when he started killing the kids and the village that killed his mother, and then obviously seeing how he turned to the dark side, because there's reason for turning into the dark side, and seeing how the kind of like, for me personally, the council, it was in age of his downfall, and just like the whole how the themes of like internal conflict and deception, how that came into play. Yeah, I think and obviously the whole comedic humor as well, which I really liked in terms of the robots, how they use that in them. So I really like that as well. So yeah, I think for me personally, those are the reasons why I prefer this trilogy in comparison to that one. The other one was good as well. It just me, I think I definitely prefer this one. Anakin story.
Yeah, I think the story in this is maybe not necessarily better than the original trilogy, but I think that's a strong suit.
Yeah, I just think it was more emotionally invoking.
Yeah, it's certainly bigger and grander and more epic, right? It really goes for the epic scale that the original trilogy couldn't really. Like, it was already pushing against the limits of what was possible back then, and it just led to a smaller scale story, I think. But I think here you have to do a whole bunch of work to actually get to the story, because it's not terribly well told. Like, it doesn't. Like, we've talked about how the key conflict that underpins all of it is not terribly well explained, even 3 movies in, and things like that.
I do agree. There were times where it did feel like I mentioned before, that they were like skipping scenes. I don't know. It just felt like they were jumping into scenes rather than smooth transition into the scenes. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, like 3 movies in, we don't even really have heard the separatist point of view, even once, right? So it's things like that really drag it down, and then there's some scenes where the acting is just strangely bad, right? Like, I think in some it's quite good, in others it's like, why did you not do a second take, kind of thing?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you really dig into it and really get to the story, I think there's a lot to like here. So to wrap things up, next week we are venturing into the sequel trilogy with episode 7, The Force Awakens, which I think you've seen once many years ago, right?
The one with is this the John Stein with John Boyega?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, but I definitely do not remember it though. So I've seen him. I've seen like 1 or 2, but I just don't remember it.
Okay, but you've not seen 8 and 9, right? You've only seen the 1.
I don't even know. I don't remember. I think
right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, see, so it's pretty much me watching it refresh, because I don't even remember what the hell happens if I did watch it.
Okay, but then it's still maybe a bit pointless to ask for predictions if you have seen it at some point and kind of know what happens.
I don't know what happens. I don't remember.
Okay. Right. But yeah, so next week we'll talk about the next era in Star Wars. Any other last words?
Let's bring on episode 7. Alright, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion. Hervé, you wanna, after many weeks away,
Many weeks away, and not much contribution to this one, but yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're only growing and getting better and getting bigger, so feel free to join us on the journey and help push us forward.
Thank you very much. Guys, we'll catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.